very good afternoon to all the participants and the distinguished guests of this session. On behalf of the Balipara Foundation, I welcome you all to the first edition of Nagaland Eastern Himalayan Naturonomics Forum 2020. The theme of this digital forum is exploring the exemplary transition of community into hunting to community for conservation in Nagaland. To understand and explore the age-old traditional community-driven biodiversity conservation practices of the indigenous Naga tribes, supported by Naga social beliefs and customary laws, which has subsequently evolved into a successful conservation model to, to counter traditional wildlife hunting, rampant deforestation, and that has been successfully incorporated by the indigenous tribes across the state at present. We have with us today some local voices from Nagaland who are working very closely with the indigenous tribes to bring forward best community conservation models, exchange and discuss ideas and challenges towards reducing the traditional Jhum cultivations among Naga indigenous tribes. This forum will also explore and expedite upon the age-old indigenous Naga traditions and customs of protecting their biodiversity and forest by community conservation practices, and also bring a roadmap how these indigenous practices be best incorporated for sustainable livelihood generation and bring a source of economy to rural Nagaland. It will also try to bring in light the transition of indigenous Naga tribes, once recognized for traditional wildlife hunting practices and now transformed as stewards of community-led biodiversity conservation. To moderate today's session, we have with us Mr. Siddhart Edake, who is a Master's of Science in Biodiversity and currently is working as a fellow and an area convener of the Center for Biodiversity and Energy Services at the Energy and Resources Institute, New Delhi. For more than a decade, he has focused on conserving forest and biodiversity across India through his research and actions. Since 2014, Siddhart has been involved in community engagement and biodiversity documentation of community conservation areas across Nagaland. Looking forward to an interesting discussion over today's theme, that is community into hunting to community for conservation. I hand over this session to you, Siddhart. Over to you.
Thank you, Dipti. Firstly, I would like to thank Eastern Himalayan Nature Economics Forum as well as Valipada Foundation for giving us this opportunity to discuss the community-driven as well as community-managed conservation model in the state of Nagaland. We have a very diverse set of panelists today who also represent the community voices working towards conservation goal in different parts of Nagaland. Our first panelist is Ms. Bano Haralu, who is highly respected for her work on Amur Falcon conservation in the state of Nagaland. Heading the Nagaland Wildlife and Biodiversity Conservation Trust, Bano and her team has focused exclusively on conservation education and has brought about a positive change in the mindset of communities to work towards conservation. Our second panelist is Mr. Ivan Jimomi. He's the team leader of Tizu Valley Biodiversity Conservation and Livelihood Network in Jimomi district of Nagaland. Ivan is a green hero who has been involved in motivating and sensitizing community members on landscape conservation and also mobilizing neighboring villages to form a committee and jointly conserve the natural resources. Our last and final panelist is Dr. Nuklu Phum, who is involved in community mobilization and other many such initiatives that have resulted in declaration of Yao Yimchen Community Biodiversity Conservation Area in the Longling district, which gives asylum to hundreds of floral and faunal species, including Amur falcon. But before I invite the panelists to share their success stories, I would like to give a brief introduction to this interesting state and also highlight the importance of mainstreaming community conserve areas for biodiversity conservation. So I just have a presentation which I'll be uploading. Just to give you a brief introduction to Nagaland for our participants who don't know much about this beautiful landscape, it lies in the northeast part of India. The total geographical area is just 16,000 square kilometers. It's as big as probably New Delhi. It's the state is tribal, and there are more than 16 major tribes, which all have distinctive dialects and cultural features. Other than 16 major tribes, there are several other minor tribes in the state of Nagaland as well. The population is very small if you compare it with the country like India. It's just 19.8 lakhs. But this is 2011 data. There has been increase in the population now. 71% of the total population lives in the rural areas, and almost 63% of the households are engaged in farming. From the biodiversity perspective, Nagaland is a very interesting case study because it falls in the Indo-Burma hotspot as well as the Eastern Himalayan biodiversity hotspot. So, as you all know, that all the states of Nagaland combined almost cover up to 25% of India's forest cover, and that's why they are diverse in terms of floral and faunal wealth as well. So, one of the studies highlights that it has the second highest number of bird species in the world, and there are many research studies which hint that new species are being discovered in last few decades. So one of the studies says that around 353 new species have been discovered just between 1998 and 2008. So we can imagine the biodiversity that exists here and the importance of this landscape. So the forest resource management in Nagaland is also equally interesting. Almost 80% of this geographical area is under forest. But what the most interesting part is that 88.3% of its natural habitats, which are mostly forests, are managed by individuals, clans, as well as village and district councils. So basically, all the land management and the decision-making power is with the people of Nagaland. And this is in accordance to Article 371A of the Indian Constitution, which recognizes the customary practices of Nagas. And that is why Nagaland, you can say it's a true village republic, where the village or the individuals own and govern their resources, and they collectively plan the developmental activities. So that's what makes Nagaland very interesting from our point of view. Another interesting thing is the multiple usage of landscape. In this picture, you can see that there is some rice terrace cultivation happening on the lower side of the hill. Then you have some shifting cultivation, locally called as jhoom, in between. And the top side of the hill is covered by forest, because the locals know that the top side of the hills are source of water, finally that water ends up feeding the rivers. So generally the forests are not cut down there. So you will see most of the hilltops, intact. And this is a part of their indigenous knowledge that they've had for over the years. Another interesting aspect of in Nagaland is the community part of it. You can see in these moving images on the left-hand side, there is community fishing that's happening, where the entire villages gets together in the river, and in a very systematic way, they're just beating it, and whatever vibrations are coming out of it, they just stun the aquatic life, and then the village feasts on it collectively. Here in the middle image, you can see an example of community farming, where all the villagers they help each other during jhoom cultivation. And in the last image, you can see an example of community hunting, where again the entire village sets out and whatever they hunt, then they come back and they share with their fellow villagers, including women and the elderly. But over the years, there have been some threats and challenges, one being that the population has increased. Most of the population right now is concentrated in Kohima and Dimapur. The second biggest challenge in Nagaland is the jhoom cultivation. Jhoom cultivation, because the jhoom cycle has really reduced over the years. From 12 to 15 years, it's reduced to 4 to 5 years. and that's what is detrimental to the to the forest right now, because a large area is being cleared annually for shifting cultivation. And the most prudent problem is the extensive hunting and aggressive fishing, which is also being followed by Nagas traditionally, but with the use of guns and advanced weapons, it has really hampered the local wildlife population. So, what is the strategy to add? There's an age-old practice where communities have been conserving certain patches of forest, or they call it forest reserve. But in our, we basically define them as community conserved areas, where villages keep aside certain parcels of land as reserve, and no hunting or no log felling is allowed there. The reasons could be various. So a study done by my organization TERI in 2014-15, we found out that there are 407 such CCAs all across Nagaland. In total, there were 1428 villages. Out of that, almost 407 villages had active such forest reserves or community conserved areas, where there were certain rules that were laid down, that there will be no hunting there, there will be no log felling there, and that area roughly came up about 1700 square kilometers. What was interesting was 84% of these total CCS, they comprised of primary forests, which had never been felled or used for any land use purpose. When we spoke to the community, almost 78% of them reported that to avoid forest degradation, traditionally their ancestors have suggested this strategy, which is to keep certain patches of land as CCS, and almost 65% of them reported that basically it's to cover up for the loss of key wildlife species. So many such CCAs actually treat these reserves as breeding grounds, where they do not hunt or kill animals, but once these animals come out of these CCAs, then they're hunted and then they're relished. Our research also found out that the community conserve areas, though they sound very interesting, also faced a number of challenges. The first one being that the size of these CCA was very small. It was less than 500 hectares per CCA. These CCAs were sporadic and they were spread all across Nagaland. So if you look at in terms of wildlife connectivity, they weren't proving to be that successful. So in this image, for example, you can see a CCA on the right side of the river, but on the left side, the land which belongs to another village, they've just used it for Zoom cultivation. So from the perspective of wildlife movement, this model was not proving to be a good one. Almost 81% of them reported that there was a problem of alternative livelihoods, because what we found was, even though we call it community conserved areas, almost 72% of the land actually belonged to the clans, and 56% of the land belonged to the individuals. So a lot of them had just donated their land for conservation purpose, but it actually belonged to the individuals and clans. And if alternative livelihoods are not provided to them, then they might think of using these reserves for commercial purposes in future. So that was one of the constraint or challenge that we found. And many of the villages also complained that even though they have certain strict rules and regulations of not hunting and not felling trees, their neighbors are reportedly illegally entering their reserve forests or CCAs and hunting the wild animals there or cutting down the timber. So this was one of the major issue that was also reported during our study. But having said that these many challenges exist for these CCAs, like I said, we have a diverse set of panelists today who have managed to overcome these challenges, and who will be talking more about that. So now I would first request them to introduce their area of work, key challenges and solutions that they've adopted. And after they have introduced their work, I would then ask them specific questions which are important from the perspective of today's topic of discussion, as well as the objectives of this forum. May I first request Bano to share about her experience? Thank you.
Thank you, Siddhart, for showcasing Nagaland's unique and yet very, very complex social scenario. Well, my area of work is, you have talked about community conservation areas. I have worked with the community in the Waka district, which is largely outside the community conservation areas. So really in direct association with the community. So I'll share more about that after the other panelists share their work.
Thank you, Bano. May I now request Nuklu to share his experience or a little bit about his work and the landscape where he works?
Yeah, thank you, Siddhart, for this time and all the other Ma'am Banu, the panelists, and also the organizers. My background and the experiences comes in a very different um, background. Actually, I'm not from this environment or, biodiversity conservation background, but it's just my interest. Our experience and our story is based on our struggle for many, many decades. We have been, politically, in terms of developmental activities wise, we were completely neglected. So ours is a story of struggle because of, let me use the word negligence, without any support from any sector. There wasn't anything coming in terms of development except for small, programs or projects or small package that would come compulsory intervention or touching all the districts. And besides that, no other specific projects came. There was no support program from any outside source. Therefore, we decided to stand on our own feet. And one of the key factor that we wanted to identify was the resources that we had and how do we manage that. So this is a little bit of how we started the work, and the best resources that we could identify was the forest. And there was this Zoom thing coming every year. And so we decided to make use of that, Zoom into a better resource management. And that's how today we have come. We are not saying that we have been able to do much, but maybe the little story or the result that we see today, and if you are hearing any story from us, is how we decided to manage that Zoom and the forest resources that we had, which was a blessing from God, to our best use to sustainability. And that's our story. So ours is a story of struggle. We decided not to depend on others, but try to come up with better use of our resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Nuklu. I'm sure we'll be very happy to know more about your struggle and all the hard work that you put in for conservation purpose. But before we do that, may I request Mr. Ivan Jimomi to quickly just tell us a bit about his work, his activities, and the challenges that he's faced. Thank you.
Respected the host, panelist, moderator, from the biodiversity ground from the police cell, where it find I'm very enthusiastic in working in biodiversity for me. Well, I'm working as a team leader, Tizu Biodiversity and Livelihood Network that comprises of 3 CCS, that is Sky, Kiku, and under the district, Hegginboton district of Nagaland. Community conservation is the most appropriately envisaged methodology for biodiversity conservation in this myriad landscapes. Community conservation areas are demarcated by the village council with the consent of people and uphold the individual rights under the tribal customary law. TVBCLN was formed in the year 2014. It is named after Tizu River, which transects across the Grand Lash Naga Hills before entering Myanmar. This network comprises of 3 CCS of Sky, Rukri, and Kivke in the district, the Bodo district, Nagaland. The idea behind the formation of this network is to conserve the depleting ecosystem in the areas and to promote and provide sustainable livelihood opportunities in the form of ecotourism, organic farming, and tribal handicrafts business. Motivation. When a few like-minded individuals from the villages of Sky woke up to find no birds in the backyards, no fishes in the river, we became deeply concerned and alarmed with the depleting scenario. We took up the task to undo the damage done by building consensus among the fellow villagers to renounce hunting, fishing, and jum cultivation. By building the consensus among the fellow villagers to renounce hunting, fishing, and jum cultivation, and we successfully managed to convince the village chief to pass a blanket ban on fishing, hunting, and picking of wild herbal plants and orchids in the forest in the year 2002. Thereafter, the same idea was replicated in the neighboring villages of Sky, namely Kivuke and Rukhi, with the aid and support from TERI, the organization based at Delhi, which turned out successfully and gave birth to Tizu Valley Biodiversity Conservation and Livelihood Network, comprising of 3 CCS. Challenges. The humble villagers primarily thrive on agriculture and produce of forest and aquatic biodiversity. Therefore, giving away their cultivable land, river for conservation remains unviable for them. However, TVBL members, with the technical aid and support of TERI and various agencies, managed to successfully implement the idea of ecotourism. Improvised farming to mitigate the loss in livelihood, and accordingly programs and policies were adapted to serve the needs of the community. The composite efforts of TVBCLN has won special mention award under India Biodiversity Award NBA 2018. Activities that has been carried out by our organization. Capacity building training supported by GF Satoyama Initiative and TERIs. Documented BBR with the help of TERI. Documentary film on wildlife and cultural activities. Local Chingu Festival Great Barbet that is initiated by our organization and conducting every year on the rotational basis of the network villages. National level biodiversity meet conducting once in a year. Registration of bylaws of the network with the state government. Marketing, management and marketing plan prepared and approved by the network. We have a recorded 232 species of birds, 200 species of butterflies, and 200 species of moth. Rediscovery of MSCS angular moth after more than a century. Herpetological diversity comprised of mandarin tringates, Jordan spit vipers, redneck tailback snake. Exposure strips for the promotion of ecotourism and farmers exchange program are being conducted from time to time.
Okay, I think Ivan has already spoken about his work and all the activities that his organization has carried out. I would like to thank all the panelists for giving a brief idea about their work. Moving on, Bano, I would like to know from you, because you've been actively working in the field of education and awareness and using that as a key to promote conservation. Can you please share your experiences of initiating eco clubs and working with the children and youth? And why did you pick up this particular age group? And also, how do you think this age group can influence the community mindset and shift it slowly towards conservation? Thank you.
Okay, a very long question, Siddhart, but I'll try and be very brief. Well, the initiation into conservation began way back in 2010 when I returned to Nagaland after my 2-decade brief brush with the media, with broadcast journalism. So I had the opportunity to actually coordinate a bird survey in Nagaland and also along for the Forest Department, carry out a random survey across 8 different locations in the state and of wildlife, which was one of its first kind, and we had used camera traps. Now, what was important about this, this study was that, first of all, it not only confirmed the need for education and the acute lack of awareness amongst the community, which was widespread, but also pointed out and confirmed the concerns about rampant hunting. At the same time, it also pointed out about the unique features of the bird life, as you mentioned yourself, across the landscape of Nagaland. Some of the major challenges, of course, was that Nagaland has till hitherto was, till up to then, was a very closed state, and very few people wanted to even venture into the state to carry out any kind of a survey. So this study, which was taken out in collaboration with NCBS Bangalore, paved the way for interest amongst the scientific group to come in and look into Nagaland as a case study for mammals, for rodents, for herpetologists, and so on, and even for birders. In that strain, if I could just go to the slides now, I just want to share briefly what happened with the Amur falcon, which is a story which is familiar now with most of us. I'd just like to share a slide, small PowerPoint presentation here, which began. This is something that I will be showing you in, it's, of course, the title should have been Amur Conservation, but here we have, this is going back to 2012, the Amur Falcon Massacre, which is something which is really well known. In fact, the story of the Amur Falcon was only alerted by Ms. Joyce Tan, who was a textile aficionado who was visiting Mokokchung. These are her pictures of the Amur falcons taken back in 2009, which she alerted the group, the Bird Ecology Study group. And from here we came to know about these beautiful raptors, the size of a kestrel, that visited Nagaland annually. And she alerted us about, you know, these obviously these hordes of birds that were coming to Nagaland and were being captured in all shapes and sizes and by all sundry. These are pictures of what later turned out to be the startling conservation, the startling massacre of these birds across over the Doyang Reservoir. What we see now here is the birds arriving over the Doyang Reservoir in Wokha district, where the Lotha community reside. And these birds were being hunted in great numbers, in thousands of numbers. And we knew very little about these birds, except for a satellite telemetry study that was being conducted by Joyce Mayberg in 2009. And this was 2012. It still showed the bird somewhere here across Nagaland. And the birds were making their way from, had made their way from Mongolia, northern China, onto Nagaland and across the central heartland of India. From the west coast would take off across the Arabian Sea and onto the eastern coast of Africa, down to South Africa. This was what we learned of this journey, this remarkable journey that was being undertaken by these falcons. So we had this knowledge, but how could we communicate this to hunters who were, as you can see, trapping the birds with their old fishing nets? And this was an activity that was taking place across board. So these are pictures, in fact, of 2012, where we were able to capture all these pictures in one day, in a couple of hours. And this, we never saw these hunters again. And so this was some way, the Amur falcon conservation is also providential in the sense that, the timing, we didn't know anything, we just went in blank, and we managed to get all these pictures. And this is how we were able to, again, communicate with the community. Two very, three important things happened in the next year, which was science came. The WII came in with the satellite tagging of the Amur falcons, and also established that same route that we had earlier said, which confirmed the route that the birds were taking, like 22,000 kilometers. All this knowledge really helped both the state government, the forest department, to enforce the law against illegal hunting, and also for our own education, which we felt was needed to bring about a turnaround in the community, was to give more information about where these birds were coming. And therefore this saw the convergence of many NGOs come in to help us, especially, as you can see here, the Bombay Natural History Society, the Raptor Research Conservation Foundation, Wildlife Conservation Trust, and WCS as well. And we saw that it brought in NGOs from different parts of India to also get involved in conservation in Nagaland through education. And here we have, of course, the Chief Minister also responded to the Children's Eco Club, where we launched the campaign of the Friends of the Amur Falcon. And what has been interesting is that the formal, sort of a formal structure that we put into the efforts for conservation also provoked the community to establish their own reception centers at the roosting site. So we had the Amur Falcon Roosting Area Union who came up. We made sure that we developed special materials of education toolkits for children. So a lot of activity was built around the initial curiosity and the initial interest by all around this this very, very mysterious bird. They continue to come, and we are grateful for all the people who have partnered with us and to make it possible for these birds to passage through Nagaland on their very great marathon of 22,000 kilometers. So this is roughly a brief story of the Amur falcon. But of course, there have been many challenges, and one of the key intervention or elements really that has helped us communicate with the community is that the Amur falcon conservation saw the convergence of not just NGOs, but of community leaders, of the response of the state government, of the political leadership that came in at the right time. And in fact, it was the current chief minister, who was then also the chief minister, Mr. Nuklu, who said that these are welcome guests. So this went out as a very strong note to the community. And while it was not a question of pointing fingers, but clearly this, the images really helped us to communicate that even for a hunting community, this was overhunting, and this was unfair in a sense of this was not really traditional, or this was not a hunter's glory to be, trapping these birds in the manner that they were being done. So the focus, there have been two thoughts on whether so much of, whether the media publicity was negative, did it hurt the sentiments of the people? But I think when we look back, it served two purposes, that it made the people rise to the occasion it made the cause of conservation, provided a platform for the cause of conservation in Nagaland. In fact, the Amur Falcon story has been an offshoot for many conservation efforts across the state and beyond the state. So in that sense, I think education has played a key role, science has played a key role to make communities aware that they are not just alone, they are in fact interconnected, not just as people, but even species, even nature is interconnected. And they play a very big role in this. And so I think one of the greatest lessons has been that I believe is that the turnaround is also hinged on the fact that farmers in Pangti and Doyang area and in Walker district felt that they are connected with farmers in South Africa who, like them, wait for these falcons to return every year to finish off billions of termites before they can begin their agricultural practices. And so this link and this interdependency, I think, has been something which continues to play a key role in the conservation efforts. So unlike the other conservation success stories where there have been clearly defined conservation areas, community conservation areas, the Amur Falcon conservation story is even more exciting and even more something even more wondrous, is that it took place outside the community conservation area, and it really was the community, the landowners who wanted, who gave so generously of the marvel, the phenomenon, or the, you know, this natural phenomenon that took place, and they have sacrificed so much. It now remains up to us, of course, as an organization, and also up to governments and policymakers as to make the right interventions so that these conservation efforts are rewarded to some degree. You know, we know that there can be no compensation for conservation, but there can definitely be some recognition for conservation. It has come in terms of awards and recognition, but in terms of bettering the livelihood and you know, providing facilities for ecotourism, providing better roads for villagers also, and also for tourists to visit these areas, and to provide more impetus for hospitality, ecotourism hospitality also to come about as a viable alternate livelihood, are some things that are still wanting. So I think these are some of the lessons that we have learned, and we continue to learn these lessons. The hype is over. The work is only just begun.
Thank you so much, Bano. As you rightly said, we are talking about community conserved areas that have been, kept as reserves since time immemorial by the ancestors. But here's a new type of, conservation where the individual land by the farmers has been donated or, given for conservation purpose. So definitely that makes the case study special for all of us. And it's a great initiative. And we hope that you continue working and motivating the communities there. Thank you so much. So from Amur Falcons, we move on to this wonderful work being done in Zoniboto district by Tizu Valley Biodiversity Conservation and Livelihood Network. So my next question is to you, Ivan. You mentioned two key things: the biodiversity documentation through biodiversity register, and also ecotourism. So can you please tell our participants how are these two things related? How did biodiversity documentation lead to initiating ecotourism in your landscape? Thank you.
Well, after the preparation and documentation of PBR, the community, youths, and students realized the importance of sustainable use of our rich biological resources. To sustain the mission and objectives, we have added the long-term strategies, wherein we organize eco-clubs, children's cultural clubs, to give platform where children can play its role. And in connection with this idea, we have initiated local Chengu festival. During the festival, children were taken to nature walks with experts of birds and butterflies and plants. Awareness program on the importance of biodiversity conservation is held with the eminent resource persons. Seminar, workshop, essay, and painting competition were conducted to promote and preserve our rich biodiversity, culture, and folklore. During the festival, the farmers community were given capacity building training with an expert from Agri and Allied Department for the improvement of their agricultural activities in a sustainable manner. To sustain the biodiversity conservation, we have promoted ecotourism, organic farming, market linking for handicrafts and handloom as alternative livelihood. Tizu Biodiversity Conservation and Livelihood, TVBCLN, is at its initial stage. As such, ecotourism as alternative livelihood has not added much value in terms of revenue generation. Connectivity issue is also one of the factors that is precluding ecotourism. However, improved organic farming with the aid and support from the experts is adding more value in terms of revenue generation comparatively. However, regardless of our poor revenue generation from ecotourism, the community dedication and commitment for biodiversity conservation is firm and resolute. And therefore, TVBCLN, in order to materialize the vision of the community conservation, is constantly monitoring the same. Thank you. This is our experience about how ecotourism we are doing it.
Okay, thank you so much for establishing that link, Ivan. I think it is very clear to our participants on how you successfully managed to link these two important aspects. Now moving on to our third and final panelist, Dr. Nuklu Phum. So as I mentioned earlier, he was responsible for forming the Yaoyamchen Biodiversity Conservation Area, which supports flora and fauna, as well as also, they conserve Amur falcons each year. After Pangti and Bokha, I believe Yaoyamchen is another area where Amur falcons visit in large numbers each year. So, Dr. Phum, we would like to know from you that since, three villages are working together in this wonderful initiative, how did you, convince them? How was the sustainable land management achieved in your area, and how is the joint management of common resources happening in your area? Can you shed some light on that? Thank you.
It's a very interesting thing, but I'm just reminded by one old, Hindi song, Kaha Suru Kaha Kodam. So I don't know where to begin, but let me begin with this. Like I said in the beginning, ours is a very different background. And so maybe because of the struggle the community had for many, many decades. When we came together, I think the customary law, the Jum, and the forest resources became one of a very important component to let the community engage with. So, like I said in the beginning, I'm actually not from this background of conservation or this subject. I come from a very different background, and I'm borrowing one story from the Bible, where this will this is an interpretation that we try to do for community benefit. There is a story about Jesus at one point of time asking his disciples to let the people, more than 5,000, go away because it's almost evening. And the disciples comes and tells him, the people are so tired and let them go. But Jesus told them, give them something to eat. And the disciples were quite knowledgeable because the crowd was more than 5,000, and it was very difficult for them to feed more than 5,000. So Jesus here asked them a question, what do you have in your hand? And to make the story very short, here is a small child bringing 5 pieces of bread and 2 pieces of fish. And Jesus breaks them into pieces, and he gives glory to God to multiply. And finally, when the crowds, more than 5,000, were made to sit, all of them equally had their own share. So we took this story from the Bible and told the community of these 3 villages, Yaung Yemchen, Alayong, and Sanglu. Yaung Yemchen is the old village, and Alayong and Sanglu are the satellite villages of the bigger village. So we brought this community and said, see, we don't have anything in hand, but look at the situation. People are advancing so much, but we are not advancing in terms of development. And if we wait for the government and other donors to come, people will not recognize. We have not been recognized. The only factor that we are to do is to stand on our own feet and let us manage the resources. So this is what we do. And if we manage the resources properly, then maybe a certain point of time, maybe after 5 years, 6 years, we will be able to do something. So with that background, we started. And so you can go to the next slide. We started making use of this customary place. Next slide. We are going to go ahead. More. I think the 3-4 slides after this. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. Yeah, so we decided to make use of this building, which is called Murung. And actually, all the decisions are being taken here. You can go to the next slide. So we decided to start an education center called a Murung Center. Next slide, where all the children would be brought, and children will be, given them tuition like math, English, science. And then even the elders were brought here, and we started to sensitize them. And we started to tell them about the prospect of biodiversity conservation, if we can, give away. So we started with this theme called Give to Receive. And so we should give our Jum, we should give our forests, we should give our, rivers, we should give our land. And therefore, in 2013, we adopted a resolution and kind of a land act called Yaung Yemchen Alayong Sanglu Land or Forest Act. And that was to give it to the community for better use and for better management. So what we did was, June was coming, and the cycle of the June for us, luckily we had a lot of forests. And so our June cycle was 15 years, 16 years. So we decided to say, okay, instead of cultivating a June for only 2 years, we said we will even make use of the fallow land. So the June will continue for 3 years. So you see, that can have a lot of positive effect on June use. So there is that. Even earlier I have talked about this. When we talk about June, there are both positive and negative impact. There are also good things happening. But if you are looking from a conservation point of view, you see every year a huge area of forest is being cut down. There is a slide later, after which I'll show after some time the effect. Okay, so what we did was, we said we will use the Zoom for 3 years, and then we will continue to extend for the new field, because we need for other crops like vegetables, we need the new Zoom. So in order to let the people get sensitized with that, we decided to conduct seminars and workshop. And this is the slide. We did the seminars and workshop in the forests, not in the villages. Next slide. And so we took the elders, we started to discuss with them about the importance of Zoom, the resources that we had. So we took the elders, the student leaders, the church leaders, and we surveyed all the forests. In fact, we had initially done all the survey. Next slide. So this is a group of people, leaders, going to different places. And then we started to use a mechanism called now, earlier they used to shoot with guns and, use different local traps. Now we introduced this concept called shooting with guns, shooting with binoculars and cameras. So instead of using guns and, traps, now we will only use binoculars and cameras. And then we also, decided to give them rewards for whoever identifies a new species. Next slide. And so finally, a huge forest area measuring some 1,000 hectares of land forest, which was not cultivated for 40, 50 years, and some part which has never been cultivated since the establishment of the village was conserved from 2018. Next slide. Including the rivers, just the forest, but we even conserve forests. Next, rivers, which was like 7 to 10 kilometers. Next slide. And so it was not just the forest, but even the adjacent rivers were all conserved. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Next slide. That's a river system. Next slide. Now, this is one thing when we say managing our resources. This is a small river, and only after you cross this river, small river, which is around 62 feet long, you go to the main river. So, no, I think the previous slide. So we constructed a small murung there with the purpose that only a small vehicle can pass through that. No big vehicle will go. Because once the big vehicle goes, the rivers are being destroyed, stone from the rivers are being collected for different developmental activities. So this was one mechanism. So we were all trying to manage the resources that we had, God-given resources, to a better use. Okay, so with that, we started taking the elders to different parts of this forest, setting up camera traps and identifying different species. Next slide, next slide. And so slowly, when these camera traps were, installed, we started identifying. These are just few of them, but hundreds and hundreds of species started regenerating. We can go to the next slide. And so what happened was, by 2010-11, the Amur Falcons started roosting in our community biodiversity conservation area. Earlier, there used to have we used to spot Amur Falcons, but not in this kind of a number. So by 2010-11, it was like 1 lakh, 2 lakhs, but gradually the Amur Falcons started. And so what we did was, next slide, we started constructing our own watchtowers, because we were not getting any support from outside. We did not even have any partners. So like this community innovative, managing our own resources, we decided to build our own watchtowers. Next slide. And this actually, after we constructed, we invited the policymakers, the people from different departments to come and inaugurate and see what we have been doing without any support from outside. Next slide. And so like that, our work continued to, manage our own resources. And this one bridge that you are seeing now was inaugurated by the former director of the Wildlife Institute, Dr. Mathur, and he came and inaugurated. And so what happened by 2015 and 16, the Amur Falcon story was going very wild. Besides the migration, regeneration of the other species. So what happened? with the initiative of the Forest Department, the Government of India, and the Wildlife Institute, thanks to Dr. Suresh, the ornithologist from Wildlife Institute, the Hungarian scientists came and satellite tracking exercises started. You can continue the slide. And so by 2016, they had already decided to satellite tag 2 birds from our conservation area. And so 2 birds were tagged. One was called Phum, and the other one was Longling. Unfortunately, Phum disappeared after a short span. But Longling is one of the success story that we have. And to make the story very short, after the satellite tracking was done, Longling was released in November 2016. Next slide. Next slide. So after Longling was released, she had already created a lot of records, and according to the scientists and those who have tagged her, Longling is a female bird, and she had already covered 3 years, and we are very happy and we are thankful to God that Longling is still alive, and we are expecting her return for her 4th journey to South Africa in another 3 to 4 weeks time. I think the slide is a little slow. If you can make it a little fast. Next slide. We also spotted a new, falcon, the white Amur falcon, which is also called as the snow white Amur falcon. So this is the latest in status of Longling. You can see there. This is the 200 days route. We have purposely just captured this. Next slide. And so next, this is the route Longling has taken, and this is as per the record of 7th of this month. Today's taken, today's 10, a day before yesterday, we have taken this, collected this record, and Longling is almost now, she has started. Now, okay, I want this slide for some time. When we say managing our resources, this is very important component here. You might have heard about these flying termites, which the Amur falcons feeds on. And so this is the structure. This is the colony of the Amur falcons. We are doing our continuous studies on this. And one of my research methodologies, model is this. And so these are different, segments, different compartment where we discovered the queen, the workers, the servants, and also the incubation chamber. So when we talk about deforestation and forest has to be properly managed, most of the things that you see outside with the when the forests are being cut down and the fires are being burn all these resources, most of these micro biological biodiverse objects are being extinct. And one factor that we were so concerned about is when a lot of deforestation takes place, many of these microbes which are even underneath are also getting extinct. And so with this, we decided to convince the community by saying, we must preserve most of the microorganisms that are getting extinct. And so next slide, you can go to the next slide. And so when we talk about management of our resources, we are not just talking about forest there, river there, but we are also trying to properly manage, what is beneath the earth. On the right side below, you can see the one there. It's the queen, the flying termites queen, and she gives, she lays egg more than 1 lakh every day, and that's how we try to manage resources. And so with this, okay, next slide, we also were given the India Biodiversity Award, a citation from bird watchers, and also citation from UNEP. As I close, what we are trying to do is, we just want to make a better use of the resources that we have. We try to ask the community to give it to us so that in return, our resources can give us a better, prospect and better resources. So even at this hour, we don't get much support from big donors. Here and there, we get little support, but we try to identify resources. We try to see the potentials in them. We try to contribute our own tiffin, and we pray to God, and God gives us back in return. And we are just trying to willing to manage our resources. Next slide. Next slide. And so as I close, it's not just the forest. Okay, next slide. You can go to the next slide. Uh, uh, we are coming up with our own community-owned projects to speed it up. We don't depend on others. We have ginger farm. We have there is uh, integrated terrace farming, and uh, I think the community is now getting to understand that with the forests that had been properly managed, now we are getting livelihood, not from others but from our own, management. And you can see this one slide. This is how we manage the resources. This is a Broomstick Tunnel, which is almost like reaching 1 kilometer. And earlier, this used to be just cut down, and this is actually a passage that takes us to the Amur Falcon roosting site and our biodiversity conservation area. But now, since 2012, once we created this tunnel, any tourists, any visitors can go through that, and then this is how we have a perfect view of biodiversity once you cross this. So today we have our own projects, our own programs, and people are engaged. Young people are being engaged, and we are very happy that though we do not receive any support from outside, a big fund flowing in, we are owner of our own resources, and we are happy that the Amur Falcon stories giving us platform to be talked outside. And thank you. I have to really rush for this platform given to us also to present what we have been initiating. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nuklu. I think that's a wonderful story and a great initiative. Actually, each of the three different stories that we heard are fine examples of exemplary transition, where you've seen communities moving from hunting to the conservation mode. I think much has already been shared by our green heroes from Nagaland. Maybe while concluding, I would just like to say that long-term sustainability, enhanced governance, and effective conservation outcomes for wild flora and fauna require sustained effort, motivation, awareness, and capacity building, as has been highlighted by all our three panelists today. And they have also said that right now they don't have any help from the government or any other external agency, and the entire initiative is being taken and managed by the community themselves. But to ensure the future of Nagaland's community conserved areas and thereby its biodiversity, I feel the government of Nagaland needs to pass a special policy to mainstream this model of biodiversity conservation within the governance mechanism and upscale it through a multi-pronged approach, including financial support and legal recognition. These two are very important aspects if you want to continue motivating the communities in the long run. Furthermore, we also feel from what we heard from our green heroes that the local communities must be trained to monitor their resources and look for alternative livelihoods, be it nature-based tourism or any other form of alternative livelihood, which will definitely help them generate support for conservation. I think the network of CCAs in Nagaland, which is at par with India's protected area network, provides a wonderful example of a fledgling people's movement for conservation that deserves to be strengthened and supported. So that's all from me. Over to you, Dipti. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the panelists. I can't thank you enough for such beautiful and delightful discussion which you all take it over. On the behalf of Balipara Foundation family, I extend our sincere gratitude for your participation, for giving us time for this discussion. And the session is at its end, and we are hoping for future collaboration so that we can work on conserving Nagaland and as a whole the Eastern Himalaya. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.